we might make it look out like it's fucking all partying and all a good time, but behind the scenes there is so much drama.
There is this one guy called Duncan Bentley. He is a extreme metal vocalist from South Africa, and two of his most prominent projects are Vulvodynia, which is a slam, deathcore kind of a band, and the other one is Xavleg, which is just, I don't even know what that is. Let's just say it's extreme music. That should be sufficient. Now, I had an interview with Duncan maybe 1.5, maybe 2 years ago on the Obscene Extreme Festival in Czech Republic, and he told me then that he's able to make a living making extreme music, and that fascinated me completely because that's something that does not happen usually. I met with him at the Berlin Death Fest and checked out how is he able to make a living out of this music, because it's so important to be able to follow your passion and make a living off your passion. And if we're totally honest, nobody is capable of doing that anyway, generally. So listen close, because Duncan is going to tell you how he's doing it, and maybe you can replicate his success, especially because maybe just a fraction of a percent of the extreme metal bands out there are capable of pulling this off. Watch this video more than one time, because it's very important. And if you have somebody who is in an extreme metal band and he wants to maybe make a living out of his music, out of his art, then share this video with him, because it's very valuable.
Fuck yeah, we here.
Duncan, awesome to see you again. How are you doing,
dude,
man?
Cheers. It's fucking awesome. It's great to be here at Berlin Death Fest. Like, just crazy. This tour is going crazy.
Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. I mean, the last time I saw you, that was like 1.5 years ago, back then at the Obscene Extreme Festival.
Yeah.
By the way, I took some comments to heart, so now I got a huge biceps here. You know, like I was so fucking thin back then. It's kind of ridiculous, you know, but now it's a little bit better.
Buffed up. It's good, bro.
Protein, brother.
God, especially for the extreme metal, you got to keep it fucking nice and buff.
Right, but you changed completely since then.
Yeah,
because
man.
you got like tattoos in your face.
I got face tattoos. I've like fucking leveled up a bit. Yeah, definitely. I feel like I always wanted the face tattoos, but I felt like I didn't know if I was that far into it yet. And in this last year, it's been like I've decided it's, you know, all or nothing. It's all or nothing. So I'm definitely just doing the music full time now, and that's it.
This video here is not like a normal interview. This is going to be for my epic playlist of the metal business, you know, and that kind of means the following. Usually, you know, if you kind of go there and meet up with bands and speak with the bands, it's all totally cool and fun and totally interesting, but there's like this one little aspect that's actually pretty huge that nobody wants to talk about, and there is the cash, there is the business behind that, you know.
Definitely.
Back then, 1.5 years ago, you already told me you can actually live off the whole music thing, you know, and that was completely fascinating, you know, like this was actually the spark, the thing that sparked up the whole story, you know, because I was thinking, how you're able to do that, you know, because I was thinking what mechanisms are behind that. So let's just go like 1.5 years back.
Definitely.
What was then the state of you, you know, like how did you make it back then?
Yeah, like a year and a half ago during Obscene, I actually had just started up the company that I've got going now, which is Crowdkill Apparel. We do mainly just like all over print merchandise for bands and stuff like that. But at that time, the band was actually splitting a bit of the cash every month that was going towards our rent and all of that type of things. And like I said before in previous interviews, because of us living in South Africa and how cheap our like currency is, how weak our currency is, earning money in dollars and euros and pounds from fans overseas is actually really lucrative for bands living in third world countries, because when we exchange that money, it's actually quite a lot in our currency and we can live off of it quite well. And I've seen this actually coming from a lot of third world country bands, like Indian bands and like bands from South America and South Africa, for instance. And that's something that a lot of people in the extreme metal scene don't actually see, that if you lived in a place where it's actually really cheap to live, or the cost of living is really cheap, that you could perhaps live off of, you know, extreme metal and those type of things. But now that I've noticed in the past year, our costs as a band have increased like quite a bit. So we've had to take a lot of the money that we were earning as, you you know, as musicians on our own, we've had to take a lot of that money and put it back into the band instead of giving it to us because of how many tours we're getting and how many more flights we have to pay for and all of that type of thing. So as a band, each member actually kind of had to find their own way to make money while we're not at home.
Yeah.
And that's been a big thing for all of us. For the guitarists in the band and the instrumentalists, I've seen that teaching, like doing lessons on Skype and things like that, has actually been bringing in a lot of money. And that's something that I've actually started doing now as well recently, is doing vocal lessons over Skype and just teaching all the young kids that come to our shows like how I do the things that I do. So that's one big income aspect for musicians that is actually pretty cool, because once your band gets pretty well known, there's lots of kids that want to just be able to speak to you for an hour and learn just a little bit that they can, and they're willing to give that money towards that. So that is one of our main money making schemes at the moment, is doing lessons and all of that while we're on tour. But for me now, this company that I've started, I'm actually based in South Africa, and we've bought a bunch of sublimation machines and a bunch of machines that we use to print the merchandise. And we've also sourced printing companies from all over the world that help us out with each order. So pretty much what we've done now is I bring in bands into my store and they give me the artwork, and then I print the merchandise and ship it off for the bands, and at the end of each month the bands get their 70% of the profit cut and I take my 30%. Like I try and keep it like at that 70-30% profit cut, because that is usually the industry standard. Like a lot of the labels and stuff that give bands these distribution deals will usually do like a 70% for the band or 30% for the label. If you're getting a contract from a label and they're offering you anything less than that, I would second guess it definitely. But there are some labels that will like give the bands 30%, for instance, and take 70% of the profit and so forth. But it depends on how desperate you are to get your merch printed, and like depends on how much money and capital you have in your band. Like for a band starting out in a third world country with just music and no capital to print their merchandise and their CDs, it's actually a blessing finding a label in Europe who's willing to print your merchandise and do all of that for you and just send you, you know what I mean, a little bit of the profit.
But back then, 1.5 years ago, your source of income were essentially music, like the sales of the records, the gigs, obviously, and all of that. Yes. But the other ventures, they were still not active back then, right?
Yeah, they were starting out, but they weren't earning enough for me to live off of, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
So like the thing is like this, what fascinated me there the most is that you said, first of all, you can kind of live off this brutal thing, you know, which still is kind of mind-blowing, you know. And that in South Africa. Now, South Africa, you might think that it's kind of cheap, but it kind of depends where you are.
Exactly, it definitely depends on where you are. That is one thing. Like, there are certain towns in South Africa or cities that I can say that are really expensive, like Cape Town, for instance, or Johannesburg is actually quite expensive as well. So Johannesburg and Cape Town are the two main cities in South Africa, and they actually have the highest population of like people outside of South Africa living there, like tourists and Europeans and so forth, and that's why the cost of living there is way more expensive. But like I'm currently living in a city called Port Elizabeth, and it's still one of the very first cities that were colonized in South Africa, but it's still very cheap and very, like, I don't know how I can say, like old school. Like the town that I live in, the cost of living is still nice and cheap, and we're not too overpopulated, so I can still live and not worry about paying too much rent and so forth and so forth. But I've seen there are some European countries that have really cheap cost of living, like Czech Republic, for instance.
Czech Republic isn't actually that cheap, you know. Here's the fascinating part. You might remember back then, you know, as we were kind of done with the interview, I told you, why don't you go to Serbia, man? You know, it's just like what, 700, 800 euros a month, you're living like a king. And you were just like, what do you mean with Serbia? What is that? And still, I was like, even yesterday, I was still in Belgrade, which is the capital there. And it's fascinating how much quality of living you get for not that much of a money, buck. You know, I mean, essentially, you can get it for like 15 euros a day. You're kind of well fed and sometimes drunk if you wish, you know. And that's the thing. South Africa tends to be a little bit more on the expensive side there, and especially if you kind of take a look how the logistics are. I mean, if you kind of how much are the flight tickets even to come to Europe, man?
Yeah, it's a bit
it must
expensive.
be ridiculous,
yeah,
isn't
it? Really is ridiculous.
Here's
man,
like 20
yeah.
euro for a flight, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And for us, it's like literally almost like 1,500 euros a flight.
No way, man. That's not good.
Yeah,
So this is what I told
insane.
also Chris, you know, you want to move to Europe or what? And he was like, I don't know, man, whatever.
Yeah. We've been thinking about it. Like, in my opinion, if I had to move to Europe, like, I would move to a place where they don't use euros, or like if they do use euros, it's probably like a cheap cost of living.
Yeah.
The reason I liked Czech Republic was like I stayed there for a few weeks on holiday as well, and I noticed how expensive it is in the main cities, like where the tourists are, obviously. But
sure.
like in the smaller towns, like just outside of the cities and stuff like that, you can actually get accommodation and like rent a place to live at like a fraction of the cost of living in Germany, for instance, or one of these other places. So like comparing the cost of living to South Africa, there are some places that are worth going to, definitely, but then there are those things that I would miss in South Africa, definitely, like the weather, and like, I don't know, just where I am, it's actually really cheap and safe where I am currently. But that's why, like, if I had to move to Czech Republic, or like say now Serbia, or like one of those European places, I wouldn't move to one of the main cities. I'd definitely move to a like secluded, cheaper place and just have my internet connection that I can, record it on and do whatever I need to. And then when I go on tour, that's when I'll get out, you know what I mean? That's why, like in South Africa where I am, I'm nowhere near the main cities. Like there's no nightlife or anything happening where I am, but it's really cool because I have my internet connection and I have my animals and I have my fiance, and that's fine. And I'm happy with that. If it's cheaper to live there and I can go on tour and still be able to pay rent and all of that, then it's good.
All right, so gigs, CDs, records, all of that stuff. We got merch. Now you got your own merch company. These are like four income streams. There is some coaching and teaching online and all of that. It kind of has developed over this course of time. So obviously you are now well off. Can you say that?
Yeah.
Like, but you're also coming from a place that was not that well off to begin with, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
like definitely, like my family was like super poor. That was one thing, and like the reason that they actually pushed me. They were like, you can't be doing music. They were telling me you can't be doing music and you need to be doing something else because this is not going to be bringing in money, and you need to take a trade and all of that and so forth. And I lived quite a hectic life leading up until the moment that Vulvodynia started and we started doing well. And I was working dead-end jobs. I was doing shit that just wasn't working out for me. Like I was earning maybe like 200 euros a month doing like fucking 9 to 5 jobs where I was standing on my feet the whole day and doing hard labor and stuff like that. And then eventually when Vulvodynia started out and we saw how much money was coming through the band, that's when we sat down as members and we were like, listen, yeah guys, we can all be living better and not be working for other people trying to make them money. We can concentrate on ourselves. So at the beginning, for the first 2 years, 3 years since the band started, it took about a year for us to be able to make any money, but from there we were all taking a little bit of money and living off the band and being able to just pay our rent every month and then concentrate on ourselves. And then from there we realized once we started touring, everything was way more expensive. We had to bring in all the other things to start making money. And now every cent that comes through the band kind of goes back into the band and into touring, and each member has their own sort of income. So it's really nice, and it's really important as well to have that as a band, because it sucks going on tour and having one member in the band be like stressed out or be like, bro, I don't know what to do tomorrow, I have to pay rent and that type of thing. So it's really nice to get to that point, and now we've finally gotten to the point where after tours we can actually split a little bit of money amongst each other and have at least like 500 euros or whatever it is at the end of a tour, whereas at the beginning we were coming home with nothing, type of thing. But the online sales and all of that we were making 100% out of before are all going back into the band now. But I feel like that crutch that the band gave us to get us stable and all asserted as individuals making money really helped out. So now we all have our own like businesses and aspects that we're making money with, and the band is paying for itself. So it's like the band kind of saved us all from poverty and put us on that pedestal, and now we...
But how come you're kind of good with money? Because you're an artist. There's no way that a person that is in that's essentially just an emotional person. I mean, obviously as an artist you're always emotional first and then you're functional maybe in the second or third step, you know,
Yeah,
like, and,
exactly.
how come this is actually working for you? Because there's literally millions of bands out there, and not even 1%, actually not even a tenth of a 1% is even
Yeah.
able to cut it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely also because of where we come from. Like, I feel like when we tour with a lot of bands and we mention all the time, like, hey, we're from South Africa, like, they don't realize that like they've been given the golden spoon type of thing. Like a lot of bands were just they chose that path, and they had the money, their parents had the money, and you know what I mean, it wasn't really a thing for them. Whereas for us, being an extreme metal band from South Africa of all places, being able to go out and actually do things is extremely wild. Like, it's crazy. And in our scene and in our country, everybody always pushed that on us. They were like, you know what I mean, as a South African band playing brutal death metal, you're not going to be able to go anywhere. Like, all the musicians were like, you can't do anything like playing that. And now at the point that we've gotten where we're actually earning a living off of it, all the other musicians in South Africa are like, what the fuck, like, how is this happening? But I think that the brutal death metal scene and the slam scene is so niche, and it's so small. It's all good. It's so niche and it's so small that people support each other way more than any other musical genre. So like, I just feel like in the brutal death metal scene and in the slam scene, because of how underground it is, the fans are a lot more willing to buy a t-shirt and just give a little bit towards that, you know what I mean, to keep their genre and their music alive. Whereas other genres are so overpopulated that they'll rather just pirate the music, or you know what I mean, do something like that. So.
Well, like my first assumption was actually that, you know, that the other bands from the West especially just don't have the motivation to kind of pull it off, because it's just an option of many.
Yeah, exactly.
You can do it, or you don't have to.
For us, it's like, now that the point that we're at, it's either I do this or I go back to starving and like working a dead-end job. So
like literally starving.
literally,
you know?
not even joking. Like, I go back to living in like a room that's like the size of this van, and just having no food and everything like that. So it's like I have no other option, and I have to give all that I can towards this.
Well, the way I see it, you kind of need to get your logistics down, like the cost of logistics, because I mean,
Definitely.
1,000 euros or $1 for a flight for one person,
It's so expensive.
it's not acceptable.
But that's
man,
why
you know?
definitely I feel like as a business move, maybe we'll eventually move outside of South Africa. But like at the moment, the cost of living that we have is kind of outweighing that amount that we would have to pay for the flights and all of that type of thing. And also the attachment we have just to the country, and I feel like it also brings that exotic vibe to when we play, and like people are like, what, a band from Africa? I want to go and check that. I want to see what that's all about. And that's definitely been a big thing for us, and we've kind of inspired a lot of other musicians and other people in South Africa to be like, okay, this scene isn't to be taken for granted, and to like reach for the stars and not focus just for South Africa, you know what I mean, that type of thing. So yeah, no, definitely I feel like it's important.
Okay, now you being a full-time musician that you are, how often do you tour? I mean, last time we spoke, and I told you, hey man, how about you check out the USA? And you were like, oh man, I'm not sure if we're gonna get a visa and all of that. It's complicated. And then a few months later, you know, I see like a post of yours, we are in the USA, man, you know, crushing it. So that kind of worked out pretty well. And I mean, how much do you play a year? Like half a year or whatever.
Yeah, this year has actually been insane. This is the first year now that we've actually been touring for the entire year. Like every month I've been away like at least once every month. So it's like there's not one month where I'm at home for the full month. And it's actually like, before you realize how intense it is going on that tour, you're always like, yeah, I want to go on tour for the whole year, or I want to do this all the time. But when you're actually doing it, you realize like, fuck, I have no time for anything. Because when you're on tour, a lot of the time you don't have an internet connection, or you're just in the middle of nowhere and you're doing this and that. So it's really good for me having my fiance back home, because she helps me keep the business running and everything going while I'm on tour. But yeah, dude, it's insane like how many tours we've done this year. And going to the US for us was ridiculously hard, because we had a US tour booked last year after Obscene Extreme, and we had to actually postpone that tour until the one that we done this year. And that was because of how intense it is for us to get our visas, how intense it is for us to get our visas as South Africans. Like we had to pay, I think it was something like $4,000 to lawyers in the US, so that that they could get. It was like a petition / like contract from each state that we were playing in, just stating that we're musicians and we're going to be playing there and what. And each member had to be in the band for longer than a year, so we couldn't have any session members on the tour with us. It was just like this whole thing that we had to do. But eventually we got the papers from the US lawyers, and that just stated that we were Vulvodynia and these were the members in the band, and we were playing in these in these states.
Yeah.
And after that we still had to pay to get our visas, which was like another 2 months, and we eventually got it, thinking we were going to have our visas for like 10 years so that we can go back as many times as we want. And they ended up giving us the visa for literally just the 2.5 weeks that we were in the US. So
it's like $5,000.
It was like 5,000 euros for like 2 weeks of touring. So like the costs we had in the US was ridiculous. We ended up coming back with just breaking even type of thing. But hopefully now it'll be easier for us the next time we go. But yeah, no, the US was intense for us, definitely. Europe is a lot easier now because they've given us like a 5-year visa for Europe, so we can come back as many times as we want. But yeah, being a full-time touring artist is definitely taking its toll on me. And I feel like before, when we were getting tour offers, we were just like, oh yeah, take that one, take it, and we were just accepting everything. Whereas now we're really looking at the calendar and trying to plan our year in a way that we can still have enough time for our business and working at home and like spending time with family and going on tour and all of that.
Songwriting.
Exactly, that too. That's been another thing that's kind of just been pushed to the lay side on this fucking tour, because on this year, because we've been on tour for so long that concentrating on writing music or just having that joy of sitting home and writing some music is like completely gone. So next year we've got our calendar planned, and we've definitely got a few months lined up where we're not going to be touring and we can sit down and focus on a new album.
This is such a horrible choice to make. Usually if you're an entrepreneur, there's this saying that when you're gonna go out and you have to earn money, this earning money is going to hinder you on being rich in the end, because kind of your time is getting bound by that.
Yeah, exactly. Like in the end, time is money. You start realizing that, and you're like, flub, like I'm wasting time on this and this and this. But in the end, like I feel like touring is so important, especially as like a young artist or as a newer band. You have to tour for at least 10 years or something like that to get out there, to be able to stay at home for like a year at a time, or that type of thing. Like there's still so many untouched fans, or like people out there who haven't heard our music yet that we have to get to, and fuck their ears.
Well, how is this actually working then out for your mental health, for your relationships? Because I was myself, I kind of travel a lot, not as much as you do, but in the worst, that was 2014, I believe I was 28 days home over the whole time, and it kind of wrecked me. I didn't even notice how much it wrecked me.
I've been feeling that exact same thing, like really on this whole year now, like going on tour and just being away from home. When you go on a tour that's like a month long or like 3-4 weeks, you always 2 weeks in, you get sucked into that whole vibe. You get sucked into everything, and it doesn't feel like, it feels like this is your life, and anything at home or anything related to your business and all of that just flies out of the window. And so that's why I feel like a big learning curve for me this year was realizing that when you're on tour, that it's not a big party, it's not like your holiday type of thing. You're here to work. When you get home, that's your holiday. So that's been a big thing for me. I've had to realize that when I'm on tour, I need to make sure I focus on everything, try and clear my mind, and make sure that I have my to-do list and that I'm getting things done during the day, because there's so many things that I need to be doing, and when you're on tour, it's so easy to just like throw it to the wayside and not do any of that type of stuff. So it's been really heavy on my mental health, and like getting home from tour and trying to spend, like I have so much work that needs to get done, but I also have so much time that needs to be spent with my family and with my loved ones and all of that. So whenever I get home and I I have maybe 2 weeks at home or something like that, I end up spending all of that time with my loved ones and my family instead of doing any work. And then when I get back on tour, I'm like, fuck, I wasted all my time, type of thing. But like in the end, it's like, fuck, what am I gonna do? But also another thing for me is I have this like crazy inbox anxiety at the moment. Like because there's so many inboxes. I literally have like the Vulvodynia and the Xavleg and my personal inbox on Facebook, okay? And then I have the email addresses for each three, then I have the Instagram accounts for each three, and then I also have my business's Facebook, email and Instagram. So it's literally 4 accounts on all three, and once you start replying to one of them, it's just like all these endless messages. So I have so many messages just piling up on everything, and replying to it is just like getting, you know, impossible. And that's also just causing such backlash from people, because they're like, you're ignoring me and you're doing this and blah, blah. And it's just like people don't take the time to realize how busy people are and how much things I actually have to do during the day. So it's getting to the point now where I feel like we need to hire like a secretary or like somebody to be answering our inboxes and just doing shit like that on the side, because when you're on tour the whole year doing any like logistics or like just any admin work for your bands or for your business or for your personal life, it's just like impossible. I can't do any of that stuff anymore, and because of that, it actually pisses so many people off. I meet people and they're like, bro, you ignored me like for like a year. I'm like, oh my gosh, if you only knew like how many people there are that I'm not ignoring, but there's just I can't reply to all these messages.
Yeah, man, you're actually totally lucky to have a fiance that's kind of totally cool then on your side.
Yeah, exactly. That helps me out.
Thing.
It's so important. It really is. Like I had a big thing yesterday, for instance, where we needed to send out like a ton of emails to people who ordered vinyls, and I could not find an internet connection, and luckily I managed to phone my fiance and I was like, can you please send out all these emails? And she was able to do that. And it's like, without that team of people at home helping you out while you're on tour, it's really hard to keep things going unless you have like a solid internet connection and a ton of money to keep you going in Europe.
Well, actually I meant in an emotional matter, you know, like this is a functional thing. You can kind of hire somebody, some secretary who's gonna go do like the everyday business. But what I mean is, when you're on tour all the time, you are so alone.
Exactly.
You are so lonely. Like it's,
literally, man.
You kind of meet up with a lot of people, but they're gone after the same night.
Exactly, man. That's a big thing as well, and that's why I feel like it's such a big thing having a tour package and people that you're touring with that are you're good friends with and like you become family with. From that first day, you have to greet everybody and make sure that you know, like, you know, just who everybody is, and like kind of get that family vibe with everybody. Because I've been on tours before where like you get people that are offish, or like a whole band, for instance, on a tour package that doesn't vibe with the rest of the members, and that can ruin everything. Because when you're alone and you're literally like feeling like you need somebody, you need brothers and friends around you who can just, you know, understand and help you with everything. And that's why I really love this tour package, because I feel like everybody that we have on this tour package is just like super helpful, and they make sure that like if you need something, you just ask and they do it. So it's like, it's really rad. It's cool. Like I hate having anybody who's selfish and they just like don't want to help out towards things and things like that. So
what would you tell the newer bands that are kind of starting out, and they all have these huge dreams of you know, starting off, you know, getting all kinds of groupies, you know, getting the cash? Usually tell the bands, listen, it should be a hobby at best.
Yeah.
You know?
The thing is, like, one thing that I've always said to myself is, like, with every musical genre out there, no matter what you choose to play, there's millions of people who are into that specific genre. And with social media and with all of these things these days, it's so easy to get your music to those people's ears. All you have to do is literally spam it every day and do that as much as possible. So if you're a musician and you're making music, what we done living in South Africa, and we noticed a lot of bands would pretty much just started as, like, you know what I mean, a weekend type of thing, like we're just gonna do this, and then after a few months, or like even if it's an amazing fucking band that I used to watch in South Africa, for instance, and they would just end up breaking up because they would just do the same thing every weekend. They played to the same crowd and they'd never think anything bigger. Whereas for us, we were like, we want to try and be the biggest band in the world. You need to always try and focus big as possible. And we just looked at all the bigger bands than us, like the biggest bands in our genres, members, and we try to do things exactly the same as them. Like if we were buying artwork for a new album, we'd look at who the biggest names are using. Or if we were trying to get a producer for an album, we'd try and look at who the biggest don't skimp on anything. Like try and save up as much money as possible. If you're gonna make an album, put all of it into that album, and you'll get everything back. And with us in South Africa, we didn't have any connections to anybody who would print our CDs or anything. We just literally made the music and we had it up online, and we got contacted by labels overseas who offered us that distribution deal that I was talking about, where it's usually like 70-30, and we just jumped on that, and we were like, we don't have any money of our own, but you can have the album printed and send us some copies and some blah blah. And from there, I feel like the more merch and the more CDs you can get out to a certain country, the more your fan base will grow. And that's what we've done. We let a label in the US called Brutal Gear, they picked up our EP and they asked, can they print 100 CDs and 100 t-shirts, and they'll send us 30 CDs and 30 t-shirts. And we were like, yeah, no problem. And because of that, we got our first 70 CDs out to a bunch of US fans, and we got a bunch of t-shirts out to a bunch of US fans. And I mean, if you bought something and you're wearing it, you're going to try and follow the band as much as possible. So we done that, and we try to get as much merch out as possible, and now we are where we are. So definitely, I feel like don't stop pushing and just try and do things as the bigger bands do it. Like look up to the people who you look up to and do things exactly the same way. And
would you be able to support, to kind of get back to the financial thing, would you be able to, let's say, support a family with 2 kids?
Maybe as one band it wouldn't be a possibility, but as a musician, if you recorded tons of different projects and you put them all out there, then it is a definite thing. Like with Xavleg, for instance, with this band, Chris and I just started it because we needed extra money. We saw that Vulvodynia was going in a touring direction, and we realized that all the money from that band would be going back into the band. So we needed another band that would be the internet project that we can release and take all of the money from and not worry about touring costs.
You just want to scale up.
Yeah, exactly. We just wanted a project that would be all profit, like Infinite Annihilator, for instance. They're a studio project, and because of that, it's 100% profit. They have no touring costs. They don't have to worry about flights or anything like that. They put music out there, they make the money, and they split it amongst the members, and that's 100% profit. And that's kind of what we wanted to do with Xavleg. And that's why we started the band, and we saw how well it was doing compared to our other projects. And it actually, we make about, I'd say, like 250 euros a month off of this band, just off of online sales, off of like Bandcamp and DistroKid and
that's
all of those
actually
things.
insane if you see what kind of music there
exactly
is,
and that's how much I was earning just doing a normal dead-end job in South Africa. Was around 250 euros a month. So just to have this band as a side project making that much a month is like such a blessing for us. And because of how well it's doing, I mean, we're touring with the band, which was like we never expected to. We wrote the songs thinking we'd never play it live, and then we saw, okay, fuck, people want to actually see this, so now it's moved on to touring band. But the cool thing about Xavleg is we're only planning to do a tour maybe once every 2 years, and we play some festivals which usually cover your flights. So like our costs in this band are minimal, and we can still take a good percentage of money away from it every month. Vulvodynia's costs are so high because of the amount of touring we have. We don't make anything from that every month now. Like from like a year and a half ago when we done that interview, we were making at least almost about the same per member every month. But now, because of how many tours we've accepted and all of that type of stuff and how much costs we have, there's no money coming out of Vulvodynia. All the money that's being made is just going back into the band and like doing that. But the thing is, because of how big Vulvodynia is, we're able to use that name to make money in other aspects. Like I can advertise on the Vulvodynia page that I'm doing vocal lessons, and because of that I can get like 10 new students or so and so forth. So just because it's not making money, it doesn't mean it's not still important to us, because it's still a doorway to all the other aspects and other bands and businesses we have. Like we share this band on the Vulvodynia page to get this band followers and so forth.
Yeah, okay, the usual stuff that you can kind of get some traction. All right, man. Well, absolutely fascinating for me personally, because this is super valuable. If you're gonna go out and just do music, because it's your passion, because it's something that you like, you always have to kind of ask yourself, for what? What's gonna stick after like 10 years of
is it gonna be a hobby or is it gonna be like for a living? You need to decide that from the beginning, because going on tour especially is just like it's a nail in the coffin. If you still trying to keep a job and go on tour, it's not going to work
Yeah,
out.
it's
It's
not
not going to
possible.
work. So like, if you're going to be a full-time touring musician, you need to have side ventures to make money while you're on tour. You know what I mean?
All right, now you are 100% committed, and how do you plan on expanding then this in the future? Now, when you
Yeah.
kind of get back home, you know, and all of this is kind of said and done, and you kind of regain some mental capability back,
Yeah,
you know,
composure and things like that.
and
yeah.
and then you can just kind of answer your mails or whatever, and then you kind of have a 10 minutes
Yeah,
alone.
Like
What's gonna happen, man?
like for me with this company Crowd Kill Apparel, like it's actually grown bigger than I could even imagine. And like as a musician or as a person who doesn't have any business aspect, like getting to the point where I am now with this business, I realized that it's becoming serious. Like I've actually had to start studying business side things, like aspects and all of that, and hiring like a team of people in to actually help me with everything. So my biggest goal at the moment is to make Crowd Kill Apparel like the next indie merch, or like one of those. Like I want to be like the indie merch of all over print merchandise type of thing. So like that's why I'm currently bringing in as many bands as possible. Every month I've got like maybe 3-4 new bands coming into the store, and we are the only store that's offering like the best quality all over print merchandise, and we're doing everything from bed sets to like umbrellas to shorts to all kinds of things. And we're pretty much one of the only stores, we're the first store to ever do bed sets for brutal death metal or metal bands in general. So like my idea at the moment, what I want to do is actually branch out to other genres of music doing the same thing that I'm doing. Like I've currently got Crowd Kill Apparel, which is focusing on like the brutal metal and like the extreme metal scene, but I want to open up a few other stores focusing on like the hip hop scene and like the rock scene. And once I do that and I have a bunch of businesses all allocated, then I'm going to be fine. I'm going to be like sorted and I won't have to worry about it.
What about shoes? Sneakers?
Definitely, we actually got all over print slip-ons, like Vans. We got all over print shoes, so check that shit out. We're looking into doing like high tops and things like that, but eventually, definitely. But for now, we got slippers and Vans.
It's absolutely fascinating. Well, listen, this here has been going for now over like a half an hour. It's super informative, just the way I actually wanted it to have. And I mean, if you got a band, you're starting up, you know, you should know it's extremely tough. You know, everybody can get gigs, everybody can kind of publish EPs and all of that. But if you really plan on having this lifestyle, first of all, it ain't that nice. You know, it's cool. Like, let's put it this way, it's nice.
Definitely, but
Definitely.
it is fucking hard work. Trust me. Like we might make it look out like it's fucking all partying and all a good time, but behind the scenes there is so much drama and there's so much work that goes into making everything possible. Definitely. So think about that, and if you want to go into this direction of work, just think about everything you have to sacrifice, all the family time, all the the time on the road and everything that you have to put into it. Think about that and work hard.
Awesome. All right, man. So let's get then into the venue and you're playing now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fuck yeah, dude. And I'm pretty sure I'll probably see you again later in
Oh.
the year, or like
Oh,
I end
you
up
will.
seeing people in Europe more than I see my family back home. So you'll see another interview soon.
All right. Mwah.